Lately, I've been going through a midlife crisis kind of with my reselling business. Sales have been pretty steady for the most part, at least when I'm doing my part and being consistent with listing. But I feel overall I've been stuck in the same place for way too long. So I knew something had to change, and I've been trying a lot of different things to up the profit that I'm making at the end of the day. One of the things that has my full attention right now in order to make that happen is checking selling comps and sell-through rate on items before I buy them to resell. If you want a full walkthrough on the 3 different ways I check sell-through rate and comps, you can go watch the video that I will link here and in the description below. That was last week's video, but today I want to go in a little more depth on sell-through rate. I'm going to be sharing 8 different factors you can look at and use to determine what is a good sell-through rate for you, because as I mentioned many times in that video where I share the tutorial on comps, what is a good sell-through rate for one reseller is not going to be for another. There are a lot of things to take into consideration, and these 8 things that I'm going to be sharing today are things that I've been thinking about and looking at as I'm trying to land on what is a good sell-through rate for me and my store, and when it's okay to deviate from that sell-through rate to reach the ultimate goal of making the most profit in the most efficient way possible. This list of 8 things is not going to be in any particular order because they're all really important to take into account. So let's just go ahead and jump into the first one. One major thing to consider when you're checking sell-through rate on your items is your reselling stats. And by this I mean how long you've been selling. Do you sell on other platforms or just one? Are your selling accounts in good standing? All of that is going to affect how much your items sell for and how fast. If you've been going at it for a while, you've been consistent with listing and making sales, then more than likely you already have a good grasp on reselling and the important things that go into it, like having great titles, detailed descriptions with SEO and keywords. Your photos probably already look very professional, and hopefully all of your stores have lots of great reviews. If that's the case for you, then you're more than likely going to be able to attract sales faster and maybe even get just a little bit more money than someone who is just starting and they have a fresh account with no previous buyers or reviews on it. And if you sell in multiple platforms, then there are going to be a lot more eyes on your items, so your chances of selling stuff is going to increase too. So if you're just starting and you're still learning the ropes of reselling, my suggestion is to not risk it too much. Try picking up items that are likely to sell for a little bit more and that have a sell-through rate percent a little bit on the higher end instead. Once you get more experienced and you gain some momentum, then you can start taking a little bit more risks, and you'll have the cash flow and the knowledge to experiment and pick up items that have a little bit of a lower sell-through rate. Another big thing that is going to determine what's a good sell-through rate for a piece you're considering purchasing to resell is your cost of goods, meaning how much you're paying for the item. Because if your cost of goods is very low, then you're going to have some leverage over other resellers who are selling that exact item. You'll be able to undercut the market and price your item a little bit below average. Since your cost of goods is so low, then you'll have room to do that. And if you can't do that, then your item may end up selling a little bit faster than what the sell-through rate is showing you. Here's this example of some jeans by a brand called Oat that I found. They were some wide leg jeans. They looked interesting, so I decided to look up comps for them. On the side, you can see a screenshot I have of eBay product research and the data it showed me that day. I took the screenshot just in case I was going to buy them, but after doing the math, I realized it wasn't a good idea. So here's how I quickly did the math in my head broken down. First of all, we can see that the average selling price for these jeans that product research is showing us is $22. From there, obviously, we have to take away our platform fees, which vary from platform to platform, but I like to use a 20% blanket fee for all platforms. Since Poshmark is the highest one at 20%, I just use that, and then it'll encompass all of them and give me a little bit of wiggle room for any offers, discounts, shipping when I offer free shipping or returns or anything like that. I just like to keep it at 20%. 20% of $22 is $4.40. So after deducting that, our payout would be $17.60. And from there, of course, I would have to deduct my initial cost of goods for these oat jeans, which in this case, at the store that day, they were priced at $8.50. This says payout, by the way, and this says cost of goods. I'm not sure if you can make it out. After all of this, my final profit for this item would be $9.10. I say final profit, but really it's not the final, because from here there are other reselling expenses I have, other services I pay for, softwares, apps, and I pay my kids for some of the reselling tasks as well. So I have to keep all of that in mind when I'm looking at my final profit. So that is why this did not work for me. Especially with a 20% sell-through rate, I would have to wait a while to make these $9. If I wanted it to move faster, then I'd have to price a bit lower than my competition, which is other resellers who are selling the same item. But with a $9 potential profit as it is, there is no room to do that. Now, if I would have a $1 or a $2 cost of goods instead of this $8.50, maybe there would be a little bit more room for me to price lower so that the item can move a bit faster and increase my sell-through rate at least by a little bit. But since that was not the case, I left those jeans behind. That's basically how I've been going about it lately. I do prefer to have a 30% sell-through rate when I check on eBay using product research, which, by the way, all the numbers I share in this video are using product research, because checking sell-through rate with that tool is going to give you a completely different number than if you use the traditional method. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, last week's video will explain that as well. But 30% is what I like to see there. And if I see something closer to the 20%, then I at least want my cost of goods to be very low. That way I have some room to lower the price of my item, to list it at a lower price than other resellers, and hopefully helping me sell the item a lot faster, increasing the sell-through rate for myself. And if that's not the case, if the cost of goods is not low, but that sell-through rate is still at a lower percentage, then this next thing better be true, and that is that the potential profit is worth the wait. If I'm seeing a, say, 15% sell-through rate on the app on an item, but the average selling price is also a bit low, something like $20, then I'm probably going to leave that item behind, because the end profit is not going to be worth the wait. But if I see an item has a 15% sell-through rate, but the average selling price is a lot higher, something like $60, $80, or $100, if the cost of goods that I'm paying up for the item at the store is reasonable enough, then I may end up getting that item even though the sell-through rate is on the lower end than what I usually like, because for that item the profit is going to be worth the wait. Hopefully you're able to see my phone right and I have everything aligned. I'm trying to do shots like this instead just because it makes it easier and faster for me to edit. But anyway, the example I wanted to show you for this point here is these Birkenstock Papilio Soli sandals. I put that search term here at the top, and when I searched that day for these sandals, I actually went with a 90-day time frame. Right now they're showing no results, but at the time that I sourced these sandals, there was one result for about $60. Then I clicked that time frame at the top left hand side and switched it to 6 months just to see what that looked like. If I scroll here, I can see that there was 3 sellers in the past 6 months who sold these sandals for an average selling price of $54.67. Well, I only paid $5 for these sandals, so I had a ton of room to undercut the market and try to sell these sandals faster than 6 months. I also did some research on Poshmark. There, the sell-through rate was also very terrible, but because my cost of goods was so low, I decided to take the chance, because even if I sold them at half this price, there would still be a decent profit in the end. In the end, I took a $35 offer on those sandals, and I did that because I had done their research previously and I knew that they had the potential of sitting for a very long time for me if I did not take that offer. To tie these last 2 points together, low cost of goods and potential profit, initially I bought these sandals because the potential profit was going to be worth the wait, but I ended up selling them quickly because I priced them lower than the average selling price was showing, because I had room to do that since my cost of goods was very low. Because of that, in the end, they ended up selling way faster than the sell-through rate predicted when I initially bought the sandals. The next thing that's going to determine what is a good sell-through rate for you is if the item is easy to list. In this reselling business, time really is money. The more time you spend on all of these reselling tasks, which there are a lot of them, the lower your hourly pay is going to be. This is something that I try to keep top of mind as I'm doing all of my tasks, and I'm always trying to find more efficient ways to do things, especially when it comes to sourcing. If the item I'm thinking about picking up at the thrift store needs a lot of repair, a lot of cleaning, stain treatment, even a ton of steaming, and it has a low sell-through rate, that potential profit better be really worth it. If not, that item is going to stay at the thrift store. If on the other hand, the item is easy to list, to clean, to ship, to photograph, and all of those things, I am more likely to give an item with a subpar sell-through rate a chance if the average sell price and cost of goods also make sense. So in short, if the item is very easy to list and it has a low sell-through rate but not too low, I am more likely to give it a chance than not. Next thing to consider with sell-through rate is the season we are in. The comps you see online for out of season are going to be pretty bad sometimes, because generally out of season items sell for a lot less than when they are in season, and they also tend to sell a little bit on the slower end too. So 2 things here. One is that when you are shopping for out of season items, or when we're in the middle of going from a cold weather to hot weather or vice versa, maybe be a little bit more lenient with the comps you're seeing. If you're usually okay with a 50% sell-through rate, for example, maybe you can lower that a little bit just while we're transitioning, because the comps you are going to be looking at, whether you use the product research tool or you use regular eBay search, are going to be a little bit skewed for a moment. Second thing is, if you're using product research, maybe try switching the time frame to a year or 3 years, just so that you can see more data than just the past 90 days. For this example, I'm going to use these Vince Camuto Sonbella boots I found recently. Before we look into the data, I'm going to go ahead and select my filters. Here on product research, it's showing me that the sell-through rate is $40 and the average sold price is $27.50, and that is in a 90-day time frame. We barely made it into fall, so I want to see what the average sold price would be if we included data from last year. So to do that, I'm going to select this down menu here, and I'm going to switch it to, let's go with last year. When I did that, you can see that the average sold price rose up a little bit. So taking that into account and my cost of goods at the store that day, which was $7.50 for these boots, I decided to bring them home. I probably won't price them that high, because if I scroll through the results here, I can see there are a few that sold for $70 $70 to $65. I don't think that is the norm when it comes to these kind of boots for Vince Camuto, but still, even if I took $10 away from that, $35, if I sold them at that price with my cost of goods, it still would be decent. So make sure you're switching the time frame here when we're switching from one season to another to see if you see a higher sold price. You can't see sell-through rate when you go past 90 days, but you can still see that average selling price, which is super helpful. Next thing that's going to affect what sell-through rate is good for you is storage space. This is something that was becoming a huge issue for me. As many of you know, I was selling only shoes for about 2 to 3 years, I think, and compared to clothing, shoes do take up a lot of room. That worked out just fine for me when I was sticking to listing about 5 to 6 items a day, and I maintained my overall inventory to about 500 to 550 items. But there was a point in there where I was trying to ramp up, so I started listing about 10 items a day. Listing that much made my inventory grow pretty quickly, and in efforts to just hit that listing goal, I was picking up lots of things that I maybe should not have, and I wasn't checking sell-through rate on a lot of that stuff, and that's when things started to pile up real quick for me, and I realized that that was not going to work. If I had ample space and if I had a lot of cash flow to work with, which we're going to get into next, then maybe that type of business model would work out for me. I could continue maybe sourcing based on style and on low cost of goods, because that was working for me time-wise and profit-wise too. I was making decent enough money and I was able to source much faster than I am now. But when it came to space, that was not working for me. This room right here is a pretty small room and it's the only thing I have to work with right now. So storage is one of the many reasons I decided to switch things up and to start adding clothing again into my inventory, because they take up a lot less room than shoes, and also that's one of the many reasons why I started checking sell-through rate a lot more consistently now. So the bottom line is this: if you have a lot of space for storage, you have room for items to sit just a little bit longer, so the sell-through rate for you can maybe be a little bit lower. If you're tight on space or you're picking up items that are very bulky, then you need your sell-through rate to be on the higher end, because the faster your items move, the more room you'll have to store even more inventory to sell. Along those same lines, another thing to keep in mind when deciding on a sell-through rate for an item is your cash flow. Same thing with storage space here, all of the same stuff applies. If you have a lot of cash flow to work with, then you may be okay with items sitting a little bit longer for you and tying up that money. In that case, a slightly lower sell-through rate may be okay with you. If on the other hand, you are working with limited funds, or you just prefer to keep your cash flowing a lot faster in your business, then I recommend you stick with items that have sell-through rates on the higher end instead. That way you can get your investments back a lot quicker, so you can reinvest in even more items. And the last thing I'm going to talk about that is going to determine what is a good sell-through rate for you is your niche. Some categories just naturally have a slower sell-through rate than others. Someone who focuses on selling athletic shoes, for example, are going to have a different sell-through rate than someone who sells hard goods. A toy reseller probably has a different sell-through rate metric they go by than someone who sells just books. And I don't know this for sure, but I imagine someone who's selling antique or vintage items probably have a sell-through rate a little bit on the lower end, because there is a lot smaller market for those kind of items than fashion or other things that move a lot faster. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're trying to see what is a good sell-through rate for you, is the niche you're in. And if you don't have a specific niche, that kind of item you're purchasing at that moment, just keep in mind usually about how fast do those kind of things sell. even within fashion, designer items are probably going to have a slower sell-through rate than the more faster fashion kind of clothing. So consider that when you're checking out sell-through rate. So those are some of the things that I've been thinking about and considering when I'm checking out sell-through rate at the stores. I've been seeing really good results so far. I've been doing this, I think, for a couple of months, 3 at the most. And so far, so good. I'm excited to see where this is going to take me long term. So I really hope looking at things from these 8 different angles when it comes to sell-through rate will help you too. One last thing to keep in mind though is that sell-through rate percents are not absolute and they are not 100% guarantees. Even if you pick up an item that has a 100% sell-through rate within a 90-day period as it shows on the product research app, that doesn't mean that your item will absolutely sell within 90 days. Anything can happen and you could end up selling it in just a bit longer than that. And it also could happen that you pick up an item that has a 2% sell-through rate and you happen to list it at the perfect time that someone was looking for that item in the same size they need and color, and that item could end up selling that same day. That happened to me just recently with some white Levi's skinny jeans that were for my personal collection. I listed them and they sold probably within 30-40 minutes. And just to see, because I didn't check sell-through rate on that, it was my own stuff, I wanted to see what the sell-through rate was on those jeans, and it was about 2%. So that kind of stuff can happen. At the end of the day, sell-through rate is only a guide. It's going to be up to you to make the final decision, and the more experienced you are and the more research you do, the better equipped you're going to be to make better decisions. So if you're just starting, make sure to give yourself time to learn all of these things. And aside from sell-through rate, make sure you're staying on top of trends in your niche and whatever category you're selling. Make sure you're incorporating research in your weekly schedule, especially right before you go sourcing, so that you can know what you're looking for and what quality looks like before you even get to the store. And to help you with that, I have 2 things. The first thing is a free sourcing checklist that I created a while back. Obviously, you can't go to the store and check sell-through rate on every single thing you come across. You'd be there all day. So that checklist is going to help you know what to look for in items so that you can spot quality a little bit faster and you don't waste your time checking sell-through rate on used listings. The second resource I have for you is a video that I also made a while back. I share how I research trends and fashion styles that are selling right now on Poshmark. It's probably time to make an updated video on that subject because now I also use eBay to do my research. But for now, you can go check out that video if you want to see some different ideas on how you can get started researching. Both that sourcing checklist and that video will be linked in the description of this video. And when I do make an updated one, I will link that one in the description as well. I hope you have found this video helpful. It helps you source better items when you go sourcing again. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.